Okay, so I'm not going to just give you the code. I'm going to talk through this. And I did this, I did the programming and I got to work because you can see on the screen that um, I was successful, but I erased that code, so I'm going to have to kind of reconstruct it. And I may make a mistake along the way, but hopefully not. But if I do, you'll learn something from how I deal with mistakes. So the issue is we want to start with two ones in the middle and then fan out till we got the ones all the way to the left of the screen and then one equally spaced to the right. And then we kind of repeated the pattern, came back down, and then we started all over again. So this is kind of a schematic of what we have going on. So the first line is going to be 9 spaces, the number 1, 0 spaces, the number 1, and then 9 spaces. And then we loop around in the thing, and now we have this counter k equals 2, and the number of spaces is 8, the number 1, 2 spaces in the middle, the number 1, 8 spaces. And so you can see this number here, which is going to be the number of loops through to put in single spaces, is going to decrease, whereas the number of spaces in the middle is going to increase according to this situation. And I kind of described that in the other videos. So now we're going to actually do the coding. So let me pull that up. Okay, so we're going to need some variables here. There's going to be a counting variable j, which is going to be the one that's for the loops, individual loops. There's this counter k that I just showed you, and we're going to start with k equals 1. So let's just put k equals, we'll define that. There will also be an integer j max, which will be, or a counter. This is the limit, how high the counter goes. So I'm going to call that j max. And I think that's it for right now. We might come back. Oh, we'll need a delay time so this thing doesn't go super fast. So I'm going to make it 250 milliseconds. Okay, there's no pin modes because there's no pins, but we do need the serial monitor, which is, what the heck is the command there? Begin, serial begin, 9600. Okay, so that's the serial monitor. Okay. So we have k equals 1 already defined. So if we come back to our thing, we're going to have 9 spaces, and you can see that 9 spaces is going to be 10 minus 1. So if we take 10 minus 1, we get 9. 10 minus 2 is 8. 10 minus, so that is going to be my, for this first one, we'll say j max is going to be equal to 10 minus k. And then we have a for loop. So we have for j equals 1, comma, j is equal to less than or equal to j max, and then j equals j plus, now this is the thing we're going to put in here. Yeah, well, j plus 1, that's right. And then we put one of those little curly brackets in the return. So that's our for loop. Now we do have another variable for integer, which we'll call dk. And we're going to set dk equal to 1 right now. You'll see where that comes in later. I'm just moving those over a little bit. Okay, now inside the for loop, we're going to have a serial print And thought it would have turned color here. Not sure why. Let me just pause for a second. Serial dot print. I don't know why I did that. Serial dot print. And what we're printing is just a space. So we do the double quotation marks, put in parentheses. So what will happen is we'll come through, K will be 1. So J max will be 9. So it's going to loop through here 9 times. It's going to print out a space every time it loops through it. So that's the first part here. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do, we need to print number 1. So we'll do a serial.print, and I'm going to do 1 as a character, not as a number. So it's 1 in these double quotation marks. So that's just to print the 1. Okay. Now next we have the inside. Where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. So next we have the space here, 0. And you can see this is K minus 1 times 2. So if we take 1 minus 1 times, which is 0 times 2 is 0. 2 minus 1 times 2 is 2. 3 minus 1 is 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so that's the equation. That's the counter. So we have to define this J max again for this particular loop. And it's going to be equal to, it's going to be K minus 1 times 2. And then we have this for loop. So again, we go from J equals 1 to J is less than or equal to J max. J equals So actually what we want here is, well, that's right. Yep, okay, J. Hold on just a second. So what we need is 4 spaces in here. And yeah, that'll work. Okay, so we do that. So we've got the initialization of J. That's just to get this thing started. And then we're going to run through. When K equals 1, we're going to have a J max of 0. So J is going to be less than 0 already. So it's going to be greater than 0. So it's not going to go through this loop at all. So the first time it's not going to do anything. And then the second one time it will do it'll do 2 spaces. So again, we put a quotation, these double quotation marks with a space. So that's the intermediate space thing. And then we print out the number 1 again. Again, I'm going to treat 1 as a character. And then we have the same thing as we did before. J max equals 10 minus K. Because if we go back to our space 3, it's the same as space 1. So we're going to have the same kind of arrangement. So we could just copy this, actually. So we'll copy this little bit right there. Control C, we'll come down here. I could have copied the first line as well. Control V. Okay, so that should make this thing work. Okay, so that's the first part. Now you've got 2 things you've got to do here. At the end of each line, we have to get a return without printing anything. So that's serial print ln. We also need to increase k, so k is equal to k plus 1. That's our k incrementer. And if you go back to the spreadsheet again, what we're doing there is we're just moving to the next row. So we have to cycle through here. So that's what this does. But actually what we're going to do is we're going to put a decay here, which I've defined up at the top as 1. So we're adding 1. And that's because we need to be able to come back the other direction. So let's just, and let's put a delay here so it doesn't go too fast. So we had a delay time of 250. Okay, so I'm going to try this out before I go any further. And one thing you can do is you can do this compile function, and it before it downloads anything, it'll see whether you have any syntax errors. So let's just do that. I have to give this some names. So we'll say Arduino Lab 16 assignment. Okay, so I've got something wrong here. Expected before the 4. Oh, okay, I forgot my semicolon. Let's try it again. Oh, right there. Same kind of deal, I think. Oh, I put a colon in there. So this semicolon. Okay. Okay, so I haven't downloaded into the Arduino. I was just checking to see if I made any stupid errors. Not stupid errors, you just make errors. Okay, so now we're going to download it or upload it. Open up the serial monitor and see if it's doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, so you can see what's happening. It just keeps going. So at least we got the first part right. Okay, so that's good. Now, what I want to do is I want to change this decay thing when k is greater than 10. Okay, so let's go back to the spreadsheet. So you can see that bottom here is 10. And what I want to do is I want to repeat this and then go the other direction. So this becomes 9. And it'll go all the way back to 1. These go the same way. So now I increase the space. And the same thing over here. And then the middle goes 18, 16, so on downwards. So it goes the other direction, it's just a mirror image. It goes down to 0. So that's what I want to do next, is I want to do the next part. So to do that, I'm going to change decay to -1. So we're going to have an if statement here. If k is greater than or equal to 11, then what we want to happen is we want decay equal to -1. So what that'll do is it'll count backwards. So but we also need to make k equal to 10 at that point. So what happens, it'll come through and k is equal to 10. We'll do the 10th row here, do this one, and then it'll add 1, which make it 11. So then it'll say, oh, k is greater than or equal to 11. So what I need to do is I need to make decay -1, so it goes the other direction. And I would need to set k equal to 10 so that it starts out at the right point. Okay, so then that should make it go back to the beginning. So then I need another if statement. If k is less than or equal to 0, so this is on the other side. I wanted to go back, repeat, go the other direction. So I'm going to do the same thing. If k is 0 so let's go back here. So what's happening here is going to be subtracting 1 until it gets to here. Then it'll subtract another 1. It'll go to 0, which is not in my table. So I'll change dk equal to plus 1, and I'll set k equal to 1. So that makes it so that it, what I'll have is, when it gets down to k equal to 1, dk will be negative 1, so k will become 0. So it'll satisfy this if statement. It'll change dk to plus 1, and it'll reset k to be equal to 1 instead of 0. So I think that'll make it work. So let's push the compile button here, verify button. Make sure I didn't make any mistakes on a little bit of extra code. Okay, now we can upload it. And we'll open our serial monitor. Let's see what happens. Ta-da! It worked. It just keeps going on and on and on. So I'm going to close this and explain again what we're doing here. K is this first column, this counter, and that's for as we go through the different lines in the printout. This number is how many spaces, and that's handled by the first for loop. We print the number 1, then we have a second for loop, which puts spaces between the two number 1s. Initially, there's no space, so the space is 0. Then we print the number 1, and then we do 9 spaces. These 9 spaces, the variable spaces, are put in by just printing a space inside quotation marks, because a space is a character, just like 1 is a character. Okay, so we set this J max. That's the number of times this thing goes through the loop. Tells you how many spaces are going to be. Then we print the number 1. Then we have the center thing where we put in 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, because what we're doing is we're removing spaces from the ends and we're putting them in the middle. So if you move 1 space from the ends, you put 2 in the middle. You print the number 1, and then you redo the same number of spaces at the end as you did at the beginning to make this thing symmetric. You do a print ln so that you get to a new line. You don't put anything in the argument because we don't want to print out anything. And then we update k. Initially, dk is positive 1, so it cycles through here upward. But then we want to go the other direction. So when we get to k equals 10, we do the last line, we update k, we get 11. So we have this if statement. If k is greater than or 11, then we change dk to negative 1, so then it goes, k gets smaller, and we make k back to 10, so that it matches the last thing that we did. So then with dk equal to negative 1, it'll go back down, but once it gets to the other end, we want it to go back, bounce back the other direction. So we don't want k to be less than or 0 or less than 0, so we had this if statement that says if k is less than or equal to 0, dk becomes positive 1, so it's going to go back up the other direction. And k, instead of being 0, becomes 1, so that we have this symmetric behavior. So that's it. So go ahead and put that in and upload it and take a picture of your serial monitor.